It was from her, too, that I learned the fear had not yet left the world. She was fearless enough in the daylight, and she had the oddest confidence in me. For once, in a foolish moment, I made threatening grimaces at her, and she simply laughed at them. But she dreaded the dark, dreaded shadows, dreaded black things. Darkness, though there was anything dreadful, it was a singularly passionate emotion, and it set me thinking and observing. I discovered then, among other things, that these little people gathered into the great houses after dark, and slept in droves. To enter upon them without a light was to put them into a tumult of apprehension. I never found out now to be alone within doors, after dark. Yet I was still such a blockhead that he missed the lesson of cat fear and spity of Wena's distress. I insisted upon sleeping away from these slumbering multitudes. It troubled her greatly, but in the end her odd affection for me triumphed and forfeited tonight. So for acquaintance, including the last night of fall, she slept with her head billowed on yarn. But Mr. slips away from it as I speak of her. It must have been the night before her rescue that I was awakened about dawn. I had been restless, dreaming most disagreeably that I was drowned, and that sea anemones were feeling over my face with their soft palps. I woke with a start, and with an odd fancy that some greyish animal had just rushed out of the chamber. I tried to get to sleep again, beautiful, restless and uncomfortable. It waste hat dim grey hour when things just creep in out of darkness, when everything is colourless and clear-cut, and yet unreal. I got up, and went down into the great hall, and so out upon the flagstones in front of the palace. I thought I would make a virtue of necessity, and see the sunrise. The moon was setting, and thickening moonlight and first pall of dawn were mingled in a ghast-like half-light. The bushes were inky black, the ground a sombre grey, the sky colourless and cheerless. And up the hill I thought I could see hosts. Very several times as scanned the slip eyes at white figures. Twice I fancied saw a solitary white ape-like creature running rather quickly up the hill, and once near the ruins I saw a leash of them carrying some dark body. They moved hastily. I did not see what became of them. It seemed that they vanished among the bushes. The dawn was still indistinct, you must understand. I was feeling that chill, uncertain, early morning feeling you may have known. I doubted my eyes. Past the eastern sky grew brighter, and the light of it came on, and its vivid coloring returned upon the world once more. I scanned the view keenly, but I saw no vestige of my white figures. They were mere creatures of the half-light. They must have been hosts. I said at wonder whence they dated. For a queer notion of grand talent came into my head, and amused me. If each generation die and leave ghosts, he argued, the world at last will get overcrowded with them. On that theory they would have grown anew, memorable some 800,000 years hence, and it was no great wonder to see four at once. But the jest was unsatisfying, and I was thinking of these figures all the morning until weakness rescued them out of my head. I associated them in some indefinite way with the white bonnet Mally had startled in my first passionate search for the time machine. But Weena was a pleasant substitute. Yet all the same, they were soon destined to take far deadlier posses. Zion of my mind. I think I have said how much hotter than our own was the weather of this golden age. I cannot account for it. It may be that the sun was hotter, or the earth nearer the sun. I usually assume that the June will go cooling steadily in the future. But people unfamiliar with such speculations past the hour their wind forget that the planets must ultimately fall back in body. As these catastrophes occurred, the sun will blaze with renewed energy, and it may be that some inner planet had suffered this fate. Whatever the reason, the fact remains that the sun was very much hotter than we know it. Well, one very hot morning, my 4th, I think, as I was seeking shelter from the heat and glare in a colossal ruin near the great house where I slept and federal, there happened this strange thing. Clambering among these heaps of masonry he found an narrowly whose end and side windows were blocked by fallen masses of stone. By contrast with the brilliancy outside, it seemed at first impenetrably dark. I turned groping for that change from those blackness made spots of color swim before me. Suddenly I halted spellbound. The pair of eyes, luminous by reflection against the daylight without, was watching me out of the darkness. The old instinctive dread of wild beasts came upon me. I clenched my hands and steadfastly looked at the glaring eyeballs. I was afraid to turn. Then the thought of the episode, absolute security in which humanity appeared to be living came to my mind. And then I remembered that strange terror of the dark. Overcoming my fear to some extent, I advanced a step and spoke. I will admit that my voice was harsh and ill-controlled. I put out my hand and touched something soft. Atten's high dark-tagged sidewalk piece and something white ran past me. I turned with my heart in my mouth, and saw a queer little ape-like figure, its head held down in a pursuit liar's manner, running across the sunlit space behind me. It blundered against a block Algravnut staggered aside and a moment was hidden in a black shadow beneath another pile of ruined masonry. My impression of it is, of course, imperfect, but I know it was of dull white, and had strange large grayish red eyes, also that there was flaxen hair on its head and down its back. But as I see it went too fast for me to see distinctly. I cannot even say whether it ran on all fours, or only with its forearms held very low. After an instant's pause I followed it into the second heap of ruins. I could not find it at first, but, after a time in the profound obscurity, I came to know of those round well-like openings of which I have told you, half closed by a fallen pillar. A sudden thought came to me. Could this thing have vanished down the shaft? I lit a match, and, looking down, I saw a small, white, moving creature, with large bright eyes which regarded me steadfastly as it retreated. It made me shudder. It was so like a human spitter! Each one clambering down the wall, and I saw for the first time a number of metal foot and hand rests forming a kind of flutter down the shaft. Then the light burned my fingers and fell out of my hand, going out as it dropped, and when I had lit another the little monster had disappeared. I do not know how long I sat peering down that well. It was not for some time that I could succeed in persuading myself that Finji had seen Washua. But gradually, the truth dawned on me. That man had not remained one species, but had differentiated into two distinct animals. That my graceful children of the upper world were not the sole descendant so for narration, but that this bleached, obscene, nocturnal thing, which had flashed before me, was also heir to all the ages. I thought of the flickering pillars and of my theory of an underground ventilation. I began to suspect their true import. And what, I wondered, was this lemur doing in any scheme of a perfectly balanced organization? How was it related to the indolent serenity of the beautiful upper world earths? And what was hidden down there, at the foot of that shaft? I sat upon Hidko stool telling myself that, at any rate, there was nothing to fear, and that there I must descend for the solution of any difficulties. And with Hallett was absolutely afraid to go. As I hesitated, two of the beautiful upper world people came running in their amorous sport across the daylight in the shadow. Female pursued thief, male, flinging flowers at her as he ran. They seemed distressed to find me, my arm against the overturned pillar, peering down the well. Apparently it was considered bad form to remark these apertures, for when I pointed top I zone entry had a frame a question about it in their tongue, they were still more visibly distressed and turned away. But they were interested by my matches, and he struck some to amuse them. I tried them again about the well, and again I failed. So presently I left them, meaning to go back to Weena, and see what I could get from her. But my mind waned ready in revolution guesses and impressions were slipping and sliding to a new adjustment. I had now a clue to the import of these wells, to the Vendelot, hours, to the mystery of the ghosts, to say nothing of the intact meaning of the bronze gates and the fact of the time machine. And very vaguely there came the suggestion towards the solution of the economic problem that had puzzled me. Here was the new view. Plainly, this second species of man was subterranean. There were three circumstances in particular which made me think that its rare emergence above ground was the outcome of a long-continued underground habit. In the first place, there was the bleached look common in most animals that live largely in the dark, the white fish of the Kentucky caves, for instance. Then, those large eyes, with that capacity for reflecting light, are common features soft nocturnal things witness the owl and the cat. And last of all, the evident confusion in the sunshine, that hasty yet fumbling awkward flight towards dark shadow, and that peculiar carriage of the head while in the light all reinforced the theory of an extreme sensitiveness of the retina. Beneath me feet then the earth must be tunneled mostly, and these tunnelings were the habitat of the new race. The presence of ventilating shafts and wells along the hill slopes everywhere, In fact, except along the river Val, late showed no universal variance ramifications. Once so natural, then, as to assume that it was in this artificial der world thoughts which were suave necessarito fal comfortat daylight suavstum ? The notion was so plausible that Iatunsi accepted it and went into sumeth the what is splitting that human species. I dare say I will anticipate the shape of my theory, though, for myself, I very soon felt that it fell far short of the truth. At first, proceeding from the problem so far onagit si met claras daylight a method a gradual widening got there present merely temporary and subtle difference between the capitalist and the laborer, was the key to the whole position. No doubt it will seem grotesque enough to you, and wild lie increasable exclamation point, and I it ever know the really existing circumstances to point that way. There is a tendency to utilize underground space for the less ornamental purposes of civilization. There is the Metropolitan Railway in London, for instance. There are new electric railways. There are subways. There are underground workrooms and restaurants, and they increase and multiply. Evidently, I thought, this tendency had increased till industry had gradually lost its birthright in the sky. I mean that it had gone deeper and deeper into larger and ever larger underground factories, spending a still increasing amount of its time therein, till in the end. Even now, does not an East End worker live in such artificial conditions as practically debelcator from the natural surface of the earth? Against the exclusive tendency for chair people do no doubt, to the increasing refinement of their education, and to a deepening gulf between command to deviant poor, is already leading to the closing, in their interest, of considerable portions of his face off at the land. About London, for instance, perhaps half the prettier country is shooted against intrusion. And this same widening gulf, which is due to the length and expense of the higher educational process and the increased facilities for and temptations to wards refined habits and head part of the rich, will make that exchange between class and class, that promotion by intermarriage which represents that splitting go for species along lines of social stratification less and less frequent. So, in the end, above ground you must have the haves, pursuing pleasure and comfort and beauty, and below ground the have-nots, the workers getting continually adapted to the conditions of their labor. Once they were there, they would no doubt have to parent and natalitio for the ventilation of their caverns, and if they refused, they would starve or suffocated for ever years. Such Octhemas were so constituted as to be miserable and rebellious would die, and, in the end, the balance being permanent, the survivors would become as well adapted to the conditions of underground life, and as happy in their way, as the upper world people burrito theirs. Asset si metum thereof fine beauty and the etiolated pallor followed naturally enough. The great triumph of humanity I had dreamed of took a different shape in my mind. It had been no such triumph of moral education and general cooperation as I had imagined. Instead, I saw a real aristocracy, armed with a perfected science and working to a logical conclusion the industrial system of 2 days. Its triumph had not been simply a triumph over nature, but a triumph over nature and the allowed man. This I must warn you was mythier time. I had the convenient Cicero 9 Hepaternoph Hudo, P and books. My explanation may be absolutely wrong. I still think it is the most plausible one. But even on this supposition, the balanced civilization that was at last attained must have a long since paced its net and was no far fallen into decay. The too perfect security of the upper world had led them to a slow movement of degeneration, to a general dwindling in size, strength and intelligence. That I could see clearly enough already. What had happened to the undergrounders I did not yet suspect, but from what I had seen of their murlocs that by the beways the name by which these creatures were called, I could imagine that the modification of the human type was even far more profound than among the Eloi, the beautiful race that I already knew. Then came troublesome doubts. Why had the Morlocks taken me? Or if Elsewhere had taken it? Why, too, if the Eloi were masters, could they not restore the machine to me? And why were they so terribly afraid of the dark? I proceeded, as I have said, to question Weena about this underworld, but here again I was disappointed. At first she would not understand my questions, and presently she refused to answer them. She shivered as though the topic was unendurable, and when I pressed her, perhaps a little harshly, she burst into tears. They were the only tears, except my own, I ever saw in that golden age. When I saw them I ceased abruptly to trouble about the Morlocks, and was only concerned in banishing these signs of the human inheritance from Weena's eyes. And very soon she was smiling and clapping her hands, while I solemnly burned a match,